It is a privilege and an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and all the team at REA for all of your mahi, for your hard work in organizing this conference and herding all of us stray cats. It is a privilege and a delight to be presenting from Aotearoa, New Zealand, here in Te Whanganui Atara, Wellington, the capital city. And my name is Michael Toy. I am an assistant professor of practical theology at Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I split my time between Bethlehem and Wellington at the moment.
Kia ora, my name is Michaela Richards and I'm a researcher here at Te Herenga Waka Victoria University of Wellington. And just to tautoko or support what Michael said, I am very excited to be here today, and a big thank you to Jennifer and everyone at REA for supporting this kaupapa or this environment. Yeah. So to begin, I'd like to provide the caveat that the journey into our interreligious co-teaching relationship came from quite the predicament. We had really been through the thick of it together, doing our PhDs at the same time, sharing an office, reading each other's drafts, and consuming far too many croissants as we tried to reckon with what we were actually doing in grad school. Then we were suddenly faced with the challenge of a position becoming available in our very small department. For context, there are 3 permanent staff members within the religious studies department at the time, and this role was a 6-month position to cover some maternity leave. It was a position that we both knew, we both had to apply for, and we encouraged each other to apply for it as well. But as we talked about it and sharing an office and in just having already established a close academic friendship, we came to the conclusion that we would put forward the proposal to half the position. This was something that we had to discuss with Michael's partner because it meant a half of income for both of us, obviously. But it was something that we felt that we would feel better about in doing this together. And this decision was certainly not made lightly. It was made in the shadow of scarcity, competition, and the neoliberal emphasis on efficiency, which colors all life in academia in the neoliberal university. These shadows must be examined if we are to truly look, as the theme of this conference suggests, at global landscapes and horizons of religious education. Our presentation today will therefore sketch out features of the neoliberal university and critical academic friendship before we turn to a duo-ethnographic reflection on interreligious co-teaching as critical academic friendship.
All right, so I'm going to try to advance the next slide. Here we go. So the problem is the neoliberal university, right? And there's many different definitions of what the neoliberal university is, of what neoliberalism is, from both its supporters and detractors. And for more of that, you can read our paper, which is linked online in this session. What I want to highlight is 3 different features of the neoliberal university. And the first one is audit culture. And audit culture is the culture where everything is audited, like the name suggests. But every single action comes under scrutiny within this framework of economic efficiency. And so even at my university, where we're on the Boyer model, which is supposed to be more expansive and say, okay, well, look, we've got more ways to prove that you're doing active scholarship than just peer-reviewed academic journals. But what that means is that every single piece of life is now held to account. And so it's like, okay, so I go to church, I talk to someone, is that scholarship? I publish a blog post, is this scholarship? I post on X or Threads or whatever, is this scholarship? I walk to work and I'm thinking about these things and I'm listening to podcasts, is this work? And so all of these things have to come to account to HR, who's the real villain of the story, and university administrators, the other, co-villains of the story, and make things unbearable. There's no room for fun, for joy, for playfulness in this audit culture. The second aspect that Michaela highlighted is competition. The fact that there are so few jobs means that everyone is competing for these very, very few roles. Even the teaching fellow position that we were going for, we were not the only people in our department to apply for it. We're not the only people. It wasn't internal to our university. There were other people from outside universities applying for this short-term gig. And this means that it turns colleagues, or what should be colleagues, into competitors. And there's a friendliness to competition, but there's an ugly side to it too. And I think to acknowledge the whole scope of what the neoliberal university does to academic environments, we have to acknowledge the ugliness of that, those feelings of jealousy, of tension, of friction, those complications that come into relationships when someone gets a job that you really wanted, maybe really needed. And we need to be honest about that. And the third part about the neoliberal university that I want to highlight is its emphasis on efficiency. This maybe speaks for itself, but this drive to make everything as efficient and frictionless as possible means that any room for playfulness, experimentation, any of that goes out the window. All right. So the solution is what we call critical academic friendship. And so this is drawing on Penny Sotiropoulou and Sophie Cranston's work on critical academic friendship. And here we want to be clear that critical is not disparaging, but critical as in careful, deep, analytical, supportive, that kind of critical. What Sotiropoulou and Cranston highlight is that the world of academia is different from other worlds. This kind of friendship is needed in all professional spaces, in all spaces, but there's something specific about academia in the neoliberal university that is different. And so we wanted to highlight some of those things in the neoliberal university section and demonstrate that friendship that is careful is different than drinking buddies or pub quiz mates, and is something that we bring into the classroom at Te Herangawaka, where we co-taught. All right, so a little bit more about our different co-teaching experience, and this we described this a little bit more in our paper, but we wanted to highlight a few different things here. We differ in our positionalities. I'm American. I'm Chinese American. I grew up Southern Baptist. I'm now Anglican Episcopalian, a practicing Christian. I study the digital world. I study how people make sense of the digital world, drawing on faith, culture, and theology. I'm a man. I'm queer. Yeah, and then we have Michaela.
And as you can tell from my accent, I grew up in Aotearoa, New Zealand, here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara or Wellington. I grew up in a very Catholic family, and I was a very firm Catholic believer up until I was about 17. I say firm in that I was very integrated into the church. I participated very heavily, doing readings during Mass time as part of the choir, part of youth group. However, I was also very inquisitive. I have memories of being around 10 or 11, and I would write letters to my priest asking why, as a woman, I would never be allowed to become a priest. And he's like, fantastic question. Let me try get around this a little bit. So although I was deeply embedded in my faith in the Catholic Church, there was always a questioning. And for me, this questioning came to the fore in light of, in particular, the atrocities that happened within the Catholic Church and the predatory behaviours here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And that really severed my connection. And I decided to study religious studies because of that. I wanted to understand how religion worked and how I was so embedded into this for so long, and trying to, I think, find a place for my anger and my disappointment. And I provide this caveat in a lot of ways because it really helped me in my teaching in this space in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Catholic education is a very big thing. And so I found that going through the undergrad of religious studies here at Te Hiringawaka allowed me to provide a more nuanced understanding of my emotions and a more nuanced understanding of Christianity in general. For those of you who know a bit about Catholicism, it is the idea of the one true church. So that was something that I really had to re-navigate in my expansive learning of religion and Christianity in particular. And again, I say that because as I then turned into a teacher of religious studies within the same university, within the same department, I saw myself, I saw my younger self in my students. There are a lot of angry, particularly young women coming through that were trying to find a space for that anger as well. And I guess how that showed up, the differences that showed up in the classroom was the different ways in which people related to us as well. A lot of young women could relate to me. A lot of people that, also to state, I now identify as, I guess, agnostic. Everyone hates this term, but spiritual but not religious. I stand by that firmly. Well, I know all the contestations around that, but it works for me and for where I'm at. I also study conservation here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and how religious or spiritual engagements with nature influence practices of conservation. And so that background really aided a lot of students to be drawn to me in a lot of ways, but there was also a lot of people that were drawn to Michael in very different ways as well.
That's right. That's right. And so, in light of the shadow of the neoliberal university, it says, well, the most efficient way is to have one person come up and deliver all this content, right? And what we found is that actually by having two people in the room with different ideas, different backgrounds, different positions, we were able to reach more people at a deeper level. So not only did it have that impact on the students, but it also impacted our teaching. The way that we taught would be different than if we taught solo or if we switched and swapped back and forth lectures. So I want to be clear that when we talk about co-teaching, we were both in the room, unless one of us was out of town. And that's not efficient. It's not an efficient use of time. It's not an efficient use of energy. But by having both of us there, even if someone was at the front giving a lecture, the other person was there in the room. And the way that I speak without Michaela in the room is different than if Michaela is there in the room, because as I'm teaching, I'm saying, so this is how I define religion. But as Michaela will tell you, her conception of religion or spirituality is really different. And so having that person physically there just expanded the way that we were able to engage with students and engage in the learning material. Someone just
Sorry, someone was trying to come into the room. It's our awkward pause.
Okay, and then I also wanted to talk about how our friendship at the start was an important feature of our co-teaching relationship, because without the friendship, then our co-teaching would have happened. We could have just come in as competitors, fought over the position, one of us would have won, and the other would have lost. But because we had this friendship at the start and our co-teaching relationship was grounded in friendship, we were able to imagine academia otherwise, where we split this position that was really meant for one person. And so as we co-taught, that relationship deepened, not without its frictions, not without our arguments, but deepened and developed. There's a lot more that we could go into in our paper, but I do want to save time for questions. And so want to conclude on just a few different notes on some maybe avenues for future research. So the first thing, maybe you say talk about our supervisors and
Yeah, so I think Michael and I, again, being from a small department, we only had 3 full-time staff members at the time, so it naturally occurred that Michael and I had the same supervisors who we adoringly refer to as the dream team. and all of the mahi or the work that they did to help us through our theses. And so a lot of what we formed in our academic friendship was influenced by the academic friendship that we were exposed to through them. This would be in supervisory meetings where they would just be little bickery arguments. And it really exposed to us that you can think really differently and still respect one another and still come to some form of conclusion together. And this not only aided us in our academic friendship, but it aided us in, I think, providing a model for academic friendship within the classroom as well. When our students saw the way that we engage with one another and engage with our differences, they could understand that they were allowed to think differently than one another. They're allowed to think differently to us or the readings that we prescribe them. In fact, we actively encourage them to do so. And that really wouldn't have solidified in our own academic friendship as much if we didn't have that example from our supervisors.
That's right. So some of the future avenues that we think, could be really productive for this line of investigation would be the examination beyond the dyadic model, right? And so with our supervisors, it was two people. With us, it's two people. But what about cohorts? What about groups of friends? And, Jennifer, I remember your presentation at the Association for Practical Theology on pilgrimage and that cohort model. How do those friendships develop, blossom? And how does that translate or transfer into a professional environment? And the backside of that, how do cliques and exclusionary models of gatherings and cohorts throttle flourishing? Another thing that might be interesting to look at would other organizations that resist neoliberal pressures, particularly within the university. We have chaplaincy, unions, other informal faith or interfaith networks. And a final direction that could be really promising, again, relating to this theme of global horizons, is indigenous ways of relating and being, or even relationship as being, that resist these neoliberal pressures. So, for example, using introductions or what we call a pepeha or mihi mihi to establish common connections, understanding where someone comes from and someone's background can be influential, not just for that connection, but understanding who they truly are.
And I guess what we really want to push forward in this paper, as well as that underlying idea of how friendship is profoundly human. It would be interesting for us to analyze how we became friends, because we are quite different people, and maybe it was that forced proximity of sharing an office together and going through grad school together. But this wasn't something that was planned. It wasn't something that was forced on us. So when we think through ideas of how critical academic friendship can provide flourishing co-teaching and can embrace life and embrace difference and friendship and collaboration within the constructs of a neoliberal university, we also have to think about not wanting to push those ideas or pushing friendships in order to get that desired outcome.
That's right. Otherwise, it just gets subsumed into the neoliberal, liberal, algorithmically driven life. Well, so thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share the research, and we'd welcome any discussion or other questions.
Thank you so much. This was really, I love this. I love it so much, and I do, like you all just said, want to welcome questions. If you want to put them in the chat, I'm happy to read them out, or if you want to just raise your hand and ask anything that interests you.
I'm so, oh, go ahead, Father. Go ahead, Father.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I just came in shortly after you started, and I was wondering, well, what is your definition or description of friendship and whether you accept, I think it was Aristotle who says that friendship is like a soul in two bodies. Do you, by any chance, have you heard about that, or is it a different? Is it different with you, and how so? Thank you.
Joara, thank you. Do you want to?
Got it.
Okay, yeah. So we don't have a metaphysical definition of friendship. I love Aristotle's one soul across two bodies. Metaphysically, I think, that I'd probably want to push a little bit beyond that, or maybe using different language, especially in interreligious friendships, right? So this concept of a soul is maybe more Western, maybe more Neoplatonic. And so for us, it's much more about how we relate to one another, relating to each other full of care, and aroha or love, mutual respect and reciprocity. Those would be some of the features within critical academic friendship, at least, that we want to operationalize.
Yeah, and again, the idea of the world of academia being quite distinct. Both of us went through this journey at the same time, and my natural friend circle doesn't have many, if any, other academics in it, and it is quite a unique journey, and that's what makes academic friendship, I think, so important and so critical for our journeys, is that that understanding of the world in which we are embedded in when we are in academia as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this absolutely wonderful topic. I wish this could be expanded. I'm always interested in the idea of non-colonial connections and pedagogy, and in the work that I do, which is based on the African philosophy of Ubuntu. I am because we are. I find a lot of resonance with Dr. Toy, because in the work that he does, it just reminds me of Ubuntu. And so I'd love to hear more about how does this indigenous possibility in friendship, how does that demonstrate itself in the classroom setting and in a global, is there a distinction in the global context, both Western and in your context?
Thank you, China. In the context of Aotearoa, New Zealand, I am Pākehā, so I am from European descent, but born and raised within Aotearoa, New Zealand. But within the Te Ao Māori context, or the Māori worldview, as Michael mentioned, there is the idea of pepeha or mihi mihi, which is all about introduction. And the idea of that is you start with your mountain, and then you go to your river, and then your waka or your canoe, and then your iwi or your tribe, and you go down the levels, and it's all about just finding connection or placing you. And that association with place is really potent within Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I think that's something that we really brought into our classroom, and that the ways in which Michael really introduced ourselves to them, we were quite vulnerable in our introductions of, this is my religious context, this is Michael's religious context, and they are very different, and we invite that difference and we thrive in that difference as well. And I think that that was really influenced by the context of Aotearoa, New Zealand, in the ideas of relationality and finding that common connection as well.
That's right, Michaela. And there's the first Indigenous Māori Supreme Court Justice Joe Williams. He has this great speech where he says that here in Aotearoa, the land changes you. The land changes you. And the first class that I taught was in 2022. And I taught that class in New Zealand, and I taught it without ever talking about my faith, without ever talking about my religion, as if there was some kind of content that could be, just delivered into these students. And then by 2025, when I was teaching here with Michaela, I think the land changed me. And I think, I was much more willing to claim my mountain, claim my place. And that's something we really encouraged our students to do as well, partially because, in the age of AI generated essays, we're like, okay, you need to do some reflection and not just like do book summaries. But also because it's an important work of coming into your own as an analytical and critical thinker, right? And so being able to draw on who you are, what you believe, what you have believed, what you might believe in the future, doing some unsettling work of the decolonial project was a crucial part of our teaching practice. And we had a student, this wonderful, smart young student who grew up super Christian and came into our office and was like, we read this book about polytheism, and oh my gosh, I don't know what to think anymore, and her ideas about who God was, who God had to be, had been unsettled. And I think that's part and parcel with the decolonial project, right? And that's not about content delivery. It's not about giving information to pass an exam. It's about giving these tools to unsettle, decolonize, and to find new ways to flourish and grow together, especially across difference.
We've got time for one more question. If anybody wants to ask.
Maybe I'll just quickly say thank you for a refreshing vision of partnership within the Academy. Very meaningful. Thank you.
Agreed. This is really a wonderful and inspiring way to think about teaching and education and working together. And a lot of institutions talk about collegiality. And I know, right? And thinking about like collegiality versus actual friendship and what that means and what that can bring to everything, because being collegial seems to go along with the competitive nature sometimes. Like we're nice to each other, but at the end of the day,
It's competition.
competition is competition. Yeah. Yeah.
If I can steal 1 second, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you, to say that I am fascinated by your acknowledgement of how the land can change you. And this is so important. You can see the wars and battles that have been going on in the Middle East over the possession of land. It's all about land, right? But on a very personal note, I have been fascinated by the thought of New Zealand. It seems is my wish to have to travel to that part of the world before I die, because I encountered somebody from there, and I thought it was from my village. And ever since, I've been trying to figure out how could people be so alike. I thought we were so different. So New Zealand, there I come. I hope I make it before I die.
Thank you so much for your comments and your questions. And thank you again to Michael and Michaela for this wonderful presentation. I want to let everyone know that I have put a link to the announcements Padlet in the chat. And what that is that is our virtual bulletin board. So you can leave messages for people. Anybody can post onto the Padlet, and you can leave a message for someone. You can post anything that you like related to the meeting onto the Padlet. It's sort of like our, like I said, virtual bulletin board. And I just have one more question here. China put in the chat just now, Dr. Toy, do you have a link to your work? Besides, obviously, we can read your paper, which is linked to the session in the schedule, so you can find that paper there. But is there any other? I would ask Michael and Michaela, both of you, do you have any other things that you want to what do they say on podcasts, to like promote to us?
Yeah, what are we gonna plug?
We do have a
Plug,
few
yes.
co-written pieces, hence critical academic friendship, which I think are quite fun personally. There's one that is about both. It's a beautiful meshing of both of our topics from our PhD theses, looking at digital contestations of the land in Aotearoa. So I'm sure that we can send through a link to that. Both of our theses, we've both read each other's, and they're both fantastic, but they're quite long. But yeah, if anyone's interested in the land in Aotearoa, that is mine. And Father, if you ever do come to our shores, please, you are very welcome, and it would be great to have you here. And yeah, Michael's got fantastic pieces to plug.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That's right. I've got a few things coming out, hopefully this year. So be on the lookout. Yeah.
Great. And if you want to plug those things, you could also put them on the Padlet. So, all right. Well, thank you again so much. I've really enjoyed this session. Thank you for coming.